Captain James Riley couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The view from his ship's bridge should have been routine. Just another day monitoring the asteroid belt, checking on mining operations, making sure everything ran smoothly. But the emergency signal blinking on his console told a different story. "Sir, we're losing the signal," Lieutenant Davis said, her fingers dancing across the communications panel. Her voice had that edge to it, the kind that came right before bad news turned into a disaster. Riley leaned forward in his chair, watching the screen flicker. The image showed an alien, not human, definitely not human, with skin that seemed to glow from within like someone had trapped starlight under translucent glass. The creature's three-fingered hand reached toward the camera, trembling, desperate. Then the light inside her skin began to fade, dimming like a dying bulb. And then nothing. Just static. "That's it," Riley muttered. "She's gone." The bridge fell silent. Nobody needed to ask what "gone" meant. They'd all seen the pattern before in the recordings the aliens had shared with them. When their light went out, they were dead. Simple as that. The aliens called themselves the Villani, and they'd shown up in Earth's solar system 3 weeks ago, running for their lives. Their ships looked like nothing humans had ever built, all flowing curves and organic shapes that pulsed with soft light, more art than engineering. Beautiful, sure, but also clearly dying. Holes in the hulls, systems failing, and way too few ships for what must have once been a thriving civilization. 37 ships had limped into human space. Now only 3 remained, hiding in the asteroid belt like scared rabbits. Riley had volunteered to make first contact. It seemed like the right thing to do, the human thing to do. Earth's governments were still arguing about protocols and procedures, debating what first contact should look like, forming committees to study the situation. Meanwhile, real people were dying out there in the cold and dark. The Villani leader, who went by something that sounded like Mirasol when translated into English, had welcomed Riley and his crew aboard her flagship. Walking through those corridors had been like walking through a dying forest. Everything that should have been bright was dim. Everything that should have been alive felt like it was holding its last breath. And everywhere Riley looked, he saw empty spaces where people should have been standing. "We were number 73, Mirasol had told him, her translator struggling to turn her musical language into words Riley could understand. 73 species that the Krell have hunted since they learned to travel between the stars. She'd pulled up a holographic display, and Riley felt his stomach drop. Dozens of species stared back at him from the recording. Some looked almost human. Others were so alien that Riley couldn't even figure out which end was the head. But they all shared one thing in common, the look of absolute terror frozen on their faces in their final moments. The Krell kept recordings of their hunts. They edited them like sporting events, adding commentary in their harsh, guttural language. Mirasol played one without sound, and Riley watched in growing horror. The species in the recording looked like insects, but beautiful ones, with bodies made of something that resembled living crystal. They were defending a city, and they were doing everything right: organized military formations, advanced weapons, coordinated tactics. They fought bravely, desperately, with everything they had. It didn't matter. The Krell ships descended like predators diving on prey, all sharp angles and aggressive design. They could have bombed from orbit. They could have ended it in minutes. Instead they landed. They made it personal. They hunted. The massacre lasted 6 days. The Krell took their time savoring it. "They study you first," Mirasol explained, her light flickering with emotion. "They learn everything about you, your biology, your culture, what you fear, what you love. Then the hunt begins. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes decades. But it always ends the same way. They take their trophies. They celebrate their victory. Then they move on to find the next species to hunt." Lieutenant Davis, who'd come along for the meeting, asked the question Riley was too angry to form into words. What? What could they possibly gain? Resources? Territory? What's the point? "Sport," Mirasol said simply. "They do it because they enjoy it. Because they've always been the strongest, the fastest, the most dangerous predators in their evolution. They cannot imagine a universe where they are not the hunters. So they hunt. They've been doing it for 3,000 of their years. And they're very, very good at it." That had been 3 weeks ago. Now, standing on his bridge and watching the Villani's last transmission end in static, Riley knew the hunters had found their prey. Which meant Earth was next. "Captain," Lieutenant Johnson called from the tactical station, his voice tight with tension. "We're receiving a transmission. It's broadcasting on every frequency we have. Every satellite, every receiver, every radio in the entire solar system is picking it up." Riley's jaw clenched. "Put it on screen." The view screen flickered, and Riley got his first real look at the species that had terrified the Villani into running halfway across the galaxy. The Krell was massive. At least 8 feet tall, maybe more, with 4 arms that ended in claws that looked like they could tear through steel like tissue paper. Its skin was a mottled mix of gray and green, covered in thick plates that overlapped like natural armor. But what really got Riley's attention were the eyes, 6 of them, arranged in 2 rows across a broad, flat skull. Each one gleamed with cold, calculating intelligence. This wasn't some mindless beast. This was a thinking, planning predator that knew exactly what it was doing. The Krell wore ceremonial armor decorated with trophies. Riley recognized some of them from the recordings Mirasol had shown him. Pieces of alien technology, fragments of bone, strips of what might have been skin or hide, all arranged in a grotesque display of conquest. When it spoke, the ship's computer struggled for a moment to translate the harsh, clicking language into English. When the words finally came through, they dripped with arrogance and contempt. Species of the 3rd planet of the star you call Sol, you have been observed. You have been studied. You have been measured and evaluated. And you have been found adequate. The way it said adequate made Riley's blood boil. Like humans were barely worth the effort. Like they were disappointing prey that might not even be worth hunting. We are the Krell Dominion, the apex predators of this galaxy, the masters of the hunt. For 3,000 cycles, we have traveled among the stars, seeking worthy prey to test our skills against. 73 species have fallen before us. You will be the 74th. The Krell's mandibles clicked together in what might have been a smile or maybe a laugh. Riley couldn't tell which, and he wasn't sure it mattered. We do not come as conquerors. We have no need of your worlds or your resources. We have plenty of both. We come as hunters, following a tradition as old as our civilization. You will run. You will hide. You will fight back with everything you have. This is the nature of prey, and we expect nothing less. And in the end we will find you. We will always find you. We have never failed. The transmission shifted, showing a fleet of ships emerging from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Dozens of them, each one enormous and bristling with weapons that looked designed to intimidate as much as to destroy. They hung there in the black like a promise of death. We give you 1 rotation of your planet to prepare yourselves, the Krell continued. Use this time to say your farewells. Treasure your last moments of peace. Hold your loved ones close. Tomorrow when your sun rises, the hunt begins. May you prove more entertaining than the last species we hunted. They barely lasted a month. The transmission cut out, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Lieutenant Davis turned to Riley, her face pale. Sir, Earth Command is on priority 1. They're recalling all military personnel to their posts. They've issued evacuation orders for the outer colonies. Evacuation. Lieutenant Johnson interrupted, his voice rising. Captain, there are 50 million people living in the belt colonies. We don't have enough transport ships to evacuate 50 million people. Not even close. They're not evacuating everyone, Riley said quietly, the terrible truth settling over him like a shroud. They're evacuating whoever they can and telling the rest to hide. They're going to let the Krell hunt colonists while Earth prepares its defenses. They're sacrificing the colonies to buy time. Nobody spoke. What was there to say? It was the logical choice, the strategic choice, maybe even the only choice. But that didn't make it any less horrifying. Riley thought about Mirasol and her dying light. He thought about the crystal-bodied species making their brave, doomed last stand. He thought about 73 civilizations reduced to trophy recordings, their entire existence remembered only as entertainment for their killers. And he thought about his daughter, safe on Earth for now, who still believed humanity had finally evolved past its violent past. Who thought wars were things from history books, not things that happened to real people in real time. Lieutenant Davis, Riley said, his voice steady despite the fear trying to claw its way up his throat, open a channel to Earth Command. Tell them the horizon is staying in the belt. We're not abandoning these people. Sir, Davis protested, we're a science vessel. We don't have weapons. We don't have armor. We're not built for combat. If the Krell come after us, then we'll be the first casualties, Riley finished for her. But maybe we'll learn something useful before we die. Maybe we'll buy someone else a few more minutes to figure out a defense. Maybe we'll discover a weakness. And maybe, just maybe, we'll show the Krell that humans don't run without a fight. Davis nodded slowly, then began transmitting Riley's message to Earth Command. He knew they'd probably order him to return. He also knew he was going to ignore that order. As Riley watched the Krell fleet advancing through his solar system, slowly and deliberately, like predators that knew their prey had nowhere to run, He thought about something Mirasol had said. She told him the Krell had always been apex predators in their evolution, that they'd never known what it was like to be prey. But humans had been apex predators too. The difference was, humanity had spent 10,000 years hunting the most dangerous prey in the known universe. Other humans. Humans knew every trick, every tactic, every dirty way to win a fight because they'd used all of them on each other. They knew how to set traps, how to ambush, how to hit hard and disappear before retaliation could come. They knew how to be cruel, how to be ruthless, how to do whatever it took to survive. The Krell thought they were hunting prey. Riley wondered if they'd ever hunted prey that knew how to hunt back. Major Kate Stevens had seen war before. She'd served in the resource wars back in the 2290s, fought in 3 different conflicts across Earth, and thought she understood what combat looked like. She thought she'd seen the worst that violence had to offer. She was wrong. The mining colony of New Pittsburgh died in 43 minutes, and Kate watched every second of it from her command post on Ceres, 70 million kilometers away. The feed came from a maintenance drone that had been doing routine hull inspections when the Krell arrived. The drone's camera captured everything in perfect, horrible detail. 3 Krell hunter ships descended on the colony like birds of prey circling a wounded animal. They didn't hurry. That was the part that made Kate's stomach turn. They circled the habitat domes once, then twice, then a third time as if they were savoring the moment before the kill. Then, almost casually, they landed. The Krell warriors that emerged from those ships moved with the confidence of predators that had never known defeat. Each one stood 8 feet tall, their 4 arms moving with eerie coordination, their 6 eyes scanning the colony with cold calculation. They wore armor decorated with trophies from previous hunts, pieces of alien technology, fragments of bone, things Kate didn't want to think about too carefully. What happened next wasn't a battle. It wasn't even really a massacre. It was a hunt, pure and simple, and the Krell treated it exactly like that. They herded the colonists through the corridors like cattle being moved to slaughter. They used sonic weapons that paralyzed people but left them fully conscious and aware of what was happening. Kate watched families get separated, children pulled away from screaming parents, the elderly left behind because they couldn't move fast enough. The Krell seemed to be sorting people, categorizing them like a hunter might organize their prey by size and quality. "Turn it off," someone whispered behind Kate in the command center. She didn't know who. She didn't care. "No," Kate said, her voice hard as iron. "Everyone watches. Everyone learns. If we're going to fight these things, we need to see exactly what they are and what they do." One of the Krell, larger than the others and wearing more elaborate armor, approached the maintenance drone. For a moment, Kate thought it would destroy the camera and end the feed. Instead, it tilted its massive head and looked directly into the lens. Kate could have sworn the thing was smiling at her. It wanted them to watch. It wanted humans to see this and be afraid. The hunt lasted 37 more minutes. When it finally ended, the Krell loaded what they called their trophies onto their ships. Kate forced herself not to think about what those trophies were, and departed. They left the habitat dome breached and venting atmosphere into space, but Kate knew that wasn't intentional cruelty. The Krell simply didn't care enough about humans to bother with mercy kills. They'd taken what they wanted and moved on. New Pittsburgh's population before the attack had been 8,347 people. Survivors, 0. Over the next 3 weeks, the Krell worked their way through the outer colonies with methodical efficiency. They hit the smaller targets first, never attacking anything with more than 20,000 people. The pattern was always the same: observe from orbit, descend in their hunter ships, conduct the hunt, collect their trophies, and depart. They weren't in a hurry. They weren't worried about human resistance. They were, Kate realized with growing anger, having fun. Earth's military tried to respond. The destroyer Valiant engaged a Krell hunter ship near Jupiter's orbit, throwing everything it had at the alien vessel. The battle lasted 11 seconds. The Valiant's debris field was still expanding when Kate received the casualty report. 347 crew members, gone in less time than it took to brew a cup of coffee. "They're playing with us," Colonel Martinez said during an emergency briefing on Ceres. The asteroid colony had become the unofficial command center for Belt Defense, though everyone knew it was only a matter of time before the Krell showed up there too. They could destroy Earth from orbit right now if they wanted. Their weapons are centuries ahead of ours, maybe more. Instead, they're landing ground troops and hunting people on foot. This isn't war. It's sport to them. "Then we need to change the rules of the game," Kate said, pulling up tactical displays on the conference room's main screen. Martinez looked at her skeptically. The colonel was a good man, experienced and intelligent, but he was also a traditional military thinker. Major Stevens, we've lost every single engagement so far. Our best ships can't even scratch their shields. Our weapons bounce off their armor. Our tactics are designed for fighting other humans, Kate interrupted. Ship-to-ship battles, orbital bombardments, fleet actions. All the things we learned fighting each other. But the Krell aren't fighting like that either. They're following their own playbook and we need to understand it. She displayed footage from New Pittsburgh and 3 other colony attacks, running them side by side. Look at the pattern. They always land. They always use ground forces. They always hunt on foot, even though it would be easier and faster to just exterminate us from space. Why? Lieutenant Foster, one of the younger officers, spoke up from across the table. You already said it, Major. It's sport. They're not interested in efficiency. They want the experience of the hunt. Exactly, Kate said, leaning forward. Which means they're following rules. Their rules, their traditions, maybe some kind of hunter's code that's important to their culture. And if they're following rules, they can be predicted. If they can be predicted, they can be beaten. Martinez shook his head. Major, with respect, 73 other species probably thought the same thing. They all lost. Did they? Kate pulled up another file, one she'd been compiling secretly for the past 2 weeks. I had our computer analyze all the Krell trophy recordings. Every single species they hunted fought back the same way. Organized military resistance, fortified defensive positions, conventional warfare tactics. Every single one. She showed them edited footage from multiple hunts, different species dying in remarkably similar ways. They all fought with courage, with honor, with tactics that would have worked against any normal enemy. They formed battle lines, built fortifications, met the Krell in open combat. And they all died. The Krell choose prey that thinks like them, Kate continued. Species that value honor in combat. Species that fight in the open because hiding is cowardly. Species that believe in fair fights and following the rules of war. Look at the Krell's own behavior. They announce their arrival, they give warnings, they land troops instead of bombing from orbit. They're following a warrior code and they expect their prey to follow it too. So what are you suggesting? Martinez asked quietly, though Kate could tell from his expression that he already knew. Kate's smile was cold and hard. I'm suggesting we stop fighting like honorable warriors and start fighting like humans. We use every dirty trick we know. We ambush, we trap, we hide, we hit from behind. We make them afraid to leave their ships. We make them understand that hunting humans isn't sport, it's suicide. The room fell silent. What Kate was proposing went against every military tradition, every code of conduct, every rule of warfare that humanity had developed. It was dishonorable, underhanded, and brutal. It was also their only chance. The Krell came to Ceres exactly when the captured Villani database said they would, 4 weeks after the hunt began. 5 hunter ships this time. Ceres was a bigger prize with almost 50,000 people living in its various habitats and tunnels. Kate watched them descend from her hidden position deep in the old mining tunnels that honeycombed the asteroid. The Krell followed their established pattern perfectly, circling, landing, emerging from their ships in organized hunting formations. All units stand by, Kate whispered into her communicator. Let them think we're running scared. The civilian population of Ceres had been evacuated to the deepest tunnels days ago, behind blast doors that looked hastily sealed and poorly constructed. To the Krell sensors, it would look exactly like what they expected to see, panicked prey huddling in the dark, waiting helplessly to be hunted. The Krell moved through the colony's surface structures, smashing through doors, searching rooms, following the obvious trail toward the refugee tunnels. Kate watched them on her monitors, noting everything. How they communicated with each other. How they spread out. What their patrol patterns looked like. How fast their weapons could fire and how long it took them to reload. They were efficient and professional, but they were also relaxed. After 73 successful hunts spanning 3,000 years, why wouldn't they be? They'd never lost. They'd never even come close to losing. To them, this was just another day of sport. The lead Krell warrior reached the first blast door. It placed a breaching charge on the metal, stood back, and waited for the explosion that would blow the door open and expose the terrified humans hiding behind it. The explosion came. But not from the door. The mining tunnel ceiling, which Kate's engineers had spent 3 days carefully rigging with shaped charges and programming to detonate at precisely the right millisecond, collapsed directly onto the Krell squad. Tons of rock, accelerated by precisely calculated explosives and moving with surprising speed even in Ceres' low gravity, buried the entire group instantly. Now! Kate screamed into her communicator. Hit them now! Human soldiers emerged from dozens of hidden positions throughout the colony. They didn't form neat ranks or orderly firing lines. They came in scattered, chaotic groups that gave the Krell no clean targets. They didn't try to fight the Krell warriors head-on in honorable combat. Instead, they hit fast and disappeared, using weapons Kate's people had improvised over the past weeks. Mining charges converted into shaped explosives. Industrial lasers rigged to overload and fire at 3 times their normal power for a few critical seconds. Molotov cocktails that burned with terrifying intensity in the oxygen-rich atmosphere of the habitats. Even simple tripwires connected to cargo containers full of debris that fell from above. The Krell, for the first time in their recorded history, looked confused. This wasn't how Prey behaved. Prey ran. Prey hid. Prey fought back with honor and courage, facing their hunters in open combat even when they knew they would lose. Prey didn't set traps. Prey didn't ambush. Prey didn't use the environment as a weapon. Kate led her own squad through a maintenance corridor, tracking a Krell warrior that had become separated from its unit. They didn't attack it directly. Instead, they vented the corridor's atmosphere into space, used cutting lasers to sever the seals on its armor, and watched as the warrior asphyxiated in the vacuum. It wasn't honorable. It wasn't fair. It wasn't brave. But it worked. By the time the surviving Krell realized what was happening and retreated to their ships, they'd lost 17 warriors out of their landing force of 50. For a species that typically lost 2 or 3 warriors per hunt at most, it was a catastrophic defeat. Kate stood in the ruined surface colony as the hunter ships lifted off, and she recognized what she was seeing in their hasty, almost panicked departure. They were confused, maybe even scared. They'd come expecting easy prey and found something they didn't understand. Let them be confused. Let them be scared. Let them go back to their fleet and tell the other Krell that hunting humans wasn't like hunting the other 73 species. Major Stevens, Colonel Martinez's voice crackled over her communicator from his bunker on the far side of the colony. Earth Command is demanding an explanation. They want to know what just happened here. Kate looked at the Krell ships disappearing into the black of space, moving faster than she'd ever seen them move before. Tell them, she said slowly, that the prey just showed its teeth. The recording of the series battle spread through Earth's military networks within hours. Within days, it had leaked to civilian channels, and soon every human in the solar system had seen it. The footage showed humans using tactics no other species had tried. Ambushes instead of battles. Traps instead of fortifications. Cruelty instead of courage. Winning instead of dying with honor. It also showed something even more important. Krell warriors dying in significant numbers for the first time in 3,000 years. They could be killed. They could be beaten. They weren't invincible. In the wreckage of one of the collapsed tunnels, human engineers discovered something even more valuable than a victory. A Krell data storage device, torn from the armor of a dead warrior and somehow still functional. When Earth's best cryptographers cracked its encryption 2 days later, they found a treasure trove of information. The complete database of the Krell Dominion. Every species they'd hunted, with detailed records of tactics used and lessons learned. Every world they'd conquered. Every weapon they'd deployed. But most importantly, they found detailed records about the Krell themselves. Their biology. Their culture. Their homeworld. Their supply chains. Their ship designs. Their weaknesses. Kate Stevens stood in the conference room on Series 3 days after the battle, looking at the data displayed across a dozen screens, and felt something she hadn't felt since the Krell first arrived in human space. Oh. Send all of this to Earth immediately, she told the technicians working frantically at their stations. Every byte of data, every file, every scrap of information. Route copies through every military installation we have left. I want redundant backups on every server in the solar system. If the Krell destroy Earth tomorrow, this information survives. She turned to face the officers assembled in the room, men and women who'd fought alongside her at Ceres, who'd proven that humans could beat the Krell if they were willing to fight dirty. Tell Earth Command something else too, Kate said, her voice hard with determination. Tell them we're not just going to survive this hunt. We're going to end it. And then we're going to make sure no species ever gets hunted again. She looked back at the screens showing Krell biology, Krell ship designs, Krell homeworld coordinates. Because we're not prey anymore, Kate said quietly. We're something the Krell have never encountered before. We're prey that learned how to hunt back. And we're going to teach them what that means. The War Council met deep underground, in the same bunker where Earth's leaders had nearly voted to surrender just 6 weeks earlier. Now those same men and women sat in uncomfortable silence as General Thomas Blake outlined what he was calling humanity's new approach to the situation. Everyone in the room knew what that really meant. They were going to fight dirty, and they were going to stop pretending otherwise. The Krell have a pattern, Blake said, displaying intercepted communications on the wall-sized screen. They're bringing in what they call a Grand Hunt fleet. Apparently, our little victory at Ceres has made us interesting to them. We're no longer boring prey that dies quickly. We're a challenge now. He said the word challenge with barely concealed disgust. To the Krell, being challenging prey was an honor. To humans, it just meant more people were going to die before this was over. Kate Stevens stood next to the general, her uniform still bearing scorch marks from the Ceres battle. She'd been promoted to lieutenant colonel and given command of something called the Asymmetric Warfare Division. That was a fancy military term for what basically amounted to humanity's collective memory of every underhanded, brutal, and effective tactic humans had ever used on each other throughout history. The Krell database we captured has given us a complete picture of who we're fighting, Kate said, pulling up charts and diagrams. We know their biology now. They breathe a nitrogen-oxygen mix like we do, but with higher nitrogen content. We know their psychology. They're apex predators with a rigid honor code that they follow religiously. And most importantly, we know their weakness. She paused, making sure everyone was paying attention. They've never faced persistence hunters before. Dr. Lisa Chen, Earth's leading expert on alien biology, stepped forward. She'd spent the last month doing nothing but studying Krell physiology and comparing it to human evolutionary history. The Krell evolved on a world where predators were ambush hunters. They developed overwhelming force, struck fast, then rested while they fed. They hunt the same way in space. Devastating attacks followed by periods of celebration and trophy collection. It's built into their biology and culture. She pulled up comparative biology charts showing human and Krell skeletal and muscular systems side by side. Humans evolved completely differently. We're persistence hunters. We don't need to be faster or stronger than our prey. We just need to outlast them. We can track for days without rest. We can operate on minimal food and water. We heal from injuries that would permanently disable a Krell warrior. And most importantly, we adapt. We learn. We change tactics on the fly. The Krell don't. They follow their traditional methods because those methods have worked for 3,000 years. President Jennifer Walsh, who'd aged visibly in the past 2 months, leaned forward. How does this help us? The Grand Hunt fleet arrives in 3 weeks. We don't have time to outlast them. Then we buy time the only way humans know how, Kate said simply. We cheat. 2 weeks before the Krell Grand Hunt fleet was scheduled to arrive, humanity launched something called Operation Ghost Protocol. The name was chosen carefully. The goal was to make the Krell see ghosts everywhere, to make them paranoid, to make them understand that nothing was safe. Commander Ryan Mitchell piloted the first mission. He flew a small courier ship toward the advancing Krell fleet, deliberately making his vessel look like it had been hastily armed by desperate civilians. His ship was barely a threat to anyone, and that was the point. Krell fleet, this is the civilian transport Hope's End, Mitchell broadcast on all frequencies, his voice shaking with manufactured fear. We're carrying refugees from the outer colonies. We can't outrun you. We surrender. Please don't hurt us. I'm transmitting our location beacon now. The Krell responded exactly as the psychological profile said they would. They were intrigued. A single hunter ship broke formation and approached carefully, scanning Mitchell's vessel. The scans showed 30 human life forms packed in the cargo hold, their heat signatures clear and strong. When the Krell ship docked with Mitchell's vessel, preparing to board and claim their prey, Mitchell triggered the failsafe. The refugees in the cargo hold weren't refugees at all. They were corpses from the New Pittsburgh massacre, carefully preserved and equipped with heating elements to simulate living body heat. The cargo hold also contained 20 tons of enriched nuclear material rigged to detonate the moment the Krell boarding party breached the door. The explosion destroyed both ships instantly and heavily damaged a second Krell hunter ship that had been waiting nearby as backup. Commander Ryan Mitchell died in that explosion. But his message to the Krell fleet was crystal clear. Even human surrenders were traps now. Trust nothing. Believe nothing. Every human ship might be a bomb. Every plea for mercy might be a lie. The psychological warfare had begun. When the Krell Grand Hunt fleet finally arrived in the solar system, they found it apparently empty. The few human ships they detected fled before the Krell could get close enough to engage. The colony showed minimal life signs or none at all. Even Earth itself had gone dark, its cities dimmed, its orbital stations seemingly abandoned. To the Krell war leader, a massive specimen named Crowmore who had personally led 17 previous hunts, it looked like humanity had done what prey always did eventually. They'd run away. They'd scattered into the void, abandoning their home to escape the hunt. Crowmore was suspicious. The humans at Ceres had shown unexpected cunning. But his sensor readings were clear. The inner solar system was empty. The prey had fled. His fleet moved inward, heading for the rich hunting grounds where Earth's population centers were concentrated. The first mine detonated when a Krell cruiser passed through the asteroid belt. It wasn't a simple explosive. Human engineers had learned from the captured database that Krell shields were designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. They weren't designed to handle sustained plasma reactions at close range. The mine's detonation converted a 100-meter asteroid into a cloud of superheated gas that enveloped the cruiser. The Krell shields held for almost 3 seconds before collapsing catastrophically. The ship's hull melted like wax under a blowtorch. The Krell fleet went on high alert immediately, scanning frantically for more mines. They found thousands of them. The entire asteroid belt had been turned into the largest minefield in human history, so dense that there was no safe path through it. So the Krell fleet went around, adding 3 weeks to their journey time. 3 weeks during which humanity prepared more surprises. When the fleet finally reached Mars orbit, they found the planet's surface lifeless and its orbital space filled with what looked like abandoned stations, ancient satellites, and debris from old conflicts. Scans showed no active power sources, no life signs, nothing threatening. Crowmore sent scouts to investigate the largest orbital station. It looked abandoned, dead, harmless. It was bait and the Krell took it. The station wasn't abandoned. Hundreds of humans had been living there in cold sleep for weeks, their metabolism slowed to almost nothing, their life signs reduced to barely detectable levels. They'd been waiting with the kind of patience that only persistence hunters truly understood. When the Krell boarding parties entered the station, they found themselves in a 3-dimensional killing field that humans had spent weeks designing specifically for them. The humans had studied every second of footage from the captured database. They knew how Krell warriors moved, how they cleared rooms, what tactics they preferred. And they designed every corridor, every junction, every chamber of that station to counter those tactics. They used the station's own systems as weapons. Gravity generators that suddenly activated at crushing levels, pinning Krell warriors against bulkheads. Airlocks that opened unexpectedly, venting atmosphere and hurling warriors into space. Fire suppression systems that had been filled with industrial acids instead of flame retardant. Maintenance robots reprogrammed to attack with cutting torches and welding equipment. The Krell eventually took the station, but it cost them 40 warriors and 3 hours of brutal close-quarters combat. Every second of that combat was recorded and immediately broadcast across humanity's entire communication network. Every survivor, every soldier, every colonist watched and learned exactly how to kill Krell warriors in confined spaces. Kate Stevens led the next major operation personally. The Krell had established a forward base in Tycho crater on Earth's moon, using it to stage their planned assault on Earth itself. It was textbook Krell strategy, the same approach they'd used successfully for 3,000 years. Secure a nearby position, fortify it heavily, then launch overwhelming force from a position of strength. Kate's team didn't attack the base. They attacked something the Krell hadn't even considered defending, their supply lines. Krell warriors needed to eat. They needed ammunition for their weapons. They needed medical supplies for wounded soldiers. They needed regular resupply runs from their fleet in high orbit to keep the base operational. And every single one of those supply shuttles became a target. Human strike teams, small and fast and absolutely ruthless, began hitting every supply run. Not in open combat where the Krell's superior weapons and armor would give them the advantage, but with tactics refined through centuries of human guerrilla warfare. Ambushes from hidden positions. Improvised explosive devices planted along predictable flight paths. Snipers taking out shuttle pilots from impossible distances. And then disappearing into the lunar surface before the Krell could respond, melting into the countless craters and ravines like ghosts. The Krell sent hunter teams to track down the human guerrillas. Those teams vanished into the lunar underground, where human tunnel fighters had spent weeks preparing a 3-dimensional battlefield designed to favor smaller, more agile defenders. The Krell were stronger and better armed, but in tight tunnels where their size became a disadvantage, where every corner might hide an ambush, where the darkness was broken only by muzzle flashes and the screams of dying warriors, strength didn't matter as much as cunning. After 2 weeks of constant harassment, the Krell base at Tycho was running critically low on everything. Food, ammunition, medical supplies, even basic maintenance parts. Crowmore faced a choice he'd never had to make in 17 previous hunts. He could abandon the base and retreat, which would be seen as shameful failure. Or he could commit major fleet resources to break the siege, which would leave other positions vulnerable. He chose to hold the base, confident that Krell warriors were superior to human guerrillas in endurance. He'd studied human biology. He knew humans needed more food and rest than Krell did. He was wrong. Humans could survive for weeks on field rations that would slowly starve a Krell warrior. They could fight with injuries that would hospitalize a Krell. They could stay awake for days using chemical stimulants, crash in hidden bunkers for a few hours of sleep, then wake up ready to fight again. Their smaller size meant they needed less food, less water, less of everything. But more than physical endurance, humans had something the Krell had never encountered: the ability to sustain hatred over long periods. They could remember New Pittsburgh. They could remember the 8,000 people who died there. They could remember the thousands of other colonies that had been slaughtered. And they could channel that memory into focused, patient, methodical determination to make every single Krell warrior pay for what they'd done. On the 18th day of the siege, the Tycho base fell. Not because the Krell were defeated in glorious combat, but because they were too weak from hunger to fight effectively. When Kate led her team into the base to accept their surrender, she found Krellmore himself slumped in the command center, his massive form gaunt and exhausted. "You fight without honor," Krellmore growled in broken English, looking up at Kate with his 6 eyes dim with fatigue and something that might have been shame. "We fight to win," Kate replied coldly. "There's a difference. Honor doesn't bring back dead colonists. Following your rules doesn't save our children. We're not here to give you a good hunt. We're here to end you." She had Krellmore taken into custody, but not before making absolutely certain that every second of his surrender was recorded in perfect detail and transmitted everywhere. She wanted every Krell warrior in the solar system to see their legendary war leader defeated. Not by superior weapons or overwhelming force, but by humans who refused to play by Krell rules. By humans who remembered how to hunt. In a command bunker deep beneath Geneva, General Blake reviewed the tactical situation with his staff, and for the first time since the war began, he was almost smiling. "The Krell Grand Hunt fleet has lost 37 ships in 2 months, he announced. "Not to our fleet because we barely have a functional fleet anymore. But to mines, ambushes, traps, sabotage, and exhaustion. They've lost over 2,000 warriors. We've lost 15,000 soldiers and civilians. But here's what matters: they're losing warriors faster than they can replace them, and we're recruiting volunteers faster than they're killing us." Dr. Chen added her analysis. "The psychological impact on the Krell is severe. They're apex predators facing prey that refuses to act like prey. Some of their warriors are showing signs of what we'd call post-traumatic stress disorder. They're not adapted for prolonged warfare against an enemy that won't stand and fight honorably. It's breaking them mentally." President Walsh studied the strategic displays showing Krell positions throughout the solar system. "So what's our next move? How do we end this?" Kate Stevens, who'd been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. She'd aged 10 years in the past 3 months, her face lined with stress and lack of sleep. But her eyes were hard and clear. "We captured 3 intact Krell FTL drives in the Tycho raid," she said. "Our best engineers are reverse engineering them right now. They think they can have working human versions in 3 months, maybe less." She leaned over the tactical table, her hands flat on its surface. "When we have FTL capability, we stop defending. We take this fight to them. We start hunting Krell forces across the galaxy. We show them what it feels like to be prey in their own space." "That's insane," someone objected. "We'll be outnumbered 1,000 to 1 out there." "We're outnumbered here too," Kate said. "The difference is out there they won't be expecting us. Out there we'll be the ghosts in the dark. Out there we'll make them understand something that 73 other species never figured out." "What's that?" Blake asked. Kate's smile was cold and hard and promised violence. "That the most dangerous predator isn't the strongest or the fastest. It's the one that refuses to give up. The one that keeps coming no matter what. The one that turns being hunted into the reason to hunt back." She straightened up, looking around at all the exhausted, determined faces in the bunker. "In 3 months, we're going to do something no prey species has ever done in Krell history. We're going to reverse the hunt. And we're going to teach the entire galaxy that hunting humans was the Krell's biggest mistake." The first human ship equipped with a functioning FTL drive jumped into Krell space 6 months after the war began. It was a converted mining vessel called the Retribution, ugly and cobbled together from spare parts, but it could travel faster than light, and that was all that mattered. Lieutenant Commander Jessica Barnes commanded the ship with a crew of 67 volunteers. Every single person on board had lost someone to the Krell hunts. Every single one of them had volunteered knowing they might not come back. As the ship dropped out of FTL and the sensors lit up with dozens of Krell vessels, Barnes allowed herself a thin smile. "Well," she said calmly, "we found them." The Krell system designated Alpha 7 in human charts was a staging ground for the next wave of the Grand Hunt. Intelligence from the captured database indicated at least 50 hunter ships being outfitted here, along with supply vessels, troop carriers, and what looked like mobile facilities for processing trophies. The Krell were preparing for another major push into human space, confident that they'd eventually grind humanity down through sheer numbers and experience. Barnes's ship wasn't there to engage them in battle. The Retribution couldn't win a straight fight against 50 warships. But winning straight fights had never been humanity's plan anyway. "Mark all priority targets," Barnes ordered her weapons officer. "And then light up every communication frequency they have." The Retribution made a high-speed pass through the system, broadcasting on every Krell channel they could find. The message was simple but devastating: recorded footage of Krellmore's surrender at Tycho, followed by clips from every successful human ambush, every Krell warrior killed, every trap that had worked, every defeat the Krell had suffered in the past 6 months. And then, just to make the point absolutely clear, Barnes's weapons officer targeted the most isolated vessel in the system, a supply ship caught between refueling operations with no escorts nearby, and hit it with every weapon the Retribution carried. The supply ship died in a ball of fire visible across the entire star system. "Jump drive charging," the pilot called out as Krell hunter ships began converging on their position from every direction. 30 seconds to jump. Those 30 seconds felt like an eternity. Alarms screamed as Krell weapons locked onto them. The hull shuddered as near misses from energy weapons sent shockwaves through the ship's structure. Barnes watched the countdown timer and forced herself to breathe slowly and steadily. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The Retribution vanished into FTL just as a Krell plasma bolt passed through the space where they'd been hovering. The ship was gone, but the message remained behind, broadcasting on repeat across every Krell frequency. "Humans can reach you now. Nowhere is safe anymore. The prey has learned to hunt." Over the next 3 months, 12 more human ships struck at Krell positions across a 50 light-year radius. None of them were proper warships. They were converted freighters, mining vessels, even a passenger liner that had been hastily retrofitted with weapons and a stolen FTL drive. But they were fast, they were unpredictable, and they were absolutely ruthless. Commander Tyler West took his ship, the Persistence, to a Krell mining operation and destroyed their or processing facilities, forcing them to abandon months of work. He didn't try to fight the defending ships. He just hit the target and ran, leaving the Krell scrambling to respond to an attack that was already over by the time they understood what was happening. Captain Rachel Morrison led the Defiance in a raid on a Krell communications hub. She downloaded terabytes of data about fleet movements and strategic plans, then escaped before the defenders could organize a proper response. The raid took 17 minutes from start to finish. The intelligence she brought back gave humanity a complete picture of Krell operations across 3 sectors. But the most audacious raid of all was led by Kate Stevens herself. The Vengeance, with Kate in command, jumped directly into the Krell home system. The system where the Krell species had originated, where their government met, where their most important military installations were located. The heart of the Krell Dominion. "Colonel," her tactical officer said quietly, staring at the sensor readings with barely concealed terror, "I'm reading over 300 capital ships in this system. If they catch us, we're dead. We're so far beyond dead that—" "They won't catch us," Kate interrupted, though she didn't feel nearly as confident as she sounded. Her hands were shaking slightly, and she gripped the armrests of her command chair to steady them. "The Krell are arrogant. They think we'd never dare come here. That's what's going to save us." The Krell homeworld was a fortress. Orbital defense platforms by the hundreds. Ship patrols everywhere. Planetary shields strong enough to withstand sustained bombardment. It was untouchable by any conventional military assault. But Kate wasn't there for a conventional assault. The Vengeance broadcast its message on every frequency. More footage of Krell defeats, more recordings of human victories, more proof that the hunters could be beaten. And then Kate added a simple statement in the Krell language, carefully translated to carry maximum psychological impact. "You hunted us in our homes. Now we hunt you in yours. Nowhere is safe. We will always find you." Then Kate's team did something that would haunt the Krell for generations to come. They jumped a small nuclear device into low orbit directly over the Krell capital city. Not a massive world-ending weapon, just a small tactical device with barely enough yield to destroy a few city blocks. But that wasn't the point. The device was programmed to broadcast a countdown on all Krell frequencies, giving them plenty of time to track it, intercept it, and disarm it. Which they did in about 90 seconds, their defense systems responding with impressive speed and efficiency. But those 90 seconds changed everything. For the first time in 3,000 years of Krell history, their civilians felt what their prey had felt. The terror of knowing that death could fall from the sky without warning. The helplessness of realizing that their homes weren't safe. The understanding that their families could be taken from them in an instant by an enemy they couldn't see or fight. The device was never meant to detonate. It was meant to deliver a message more powerful than any weapon. We can reach you. Even here. Even at the heart of your civilization. How does it feel to be prey? The vengeance jumped out of the system before the Krell could organize a proper response, leaving chaos and confusion in its wake. Back in the solar system, the war had entered a new and dangerous phase. The Krell hadn't abandoned their hunt of humanity, but they'd changed their tactics drastically. They were more cautious now, more aggressive in their responses, more willing to use overwhelming force instead of treating combat like a sporting event. Which was exactly what humanity's strategists had predicted and wanted. They're getting angry, General Blake observed during a strategy session at Earth Command. And angry enemies make mistakes. They stop thinking tactically and start thinking emotionally. The data supported his analysis completely. Krell forces were taking risks they never would have taken before. They pursued human forces into obvious ambushes. They responded to provocations with emotion rather than careful calculation. They were acting like wounded predators lashing out at everything around them, not like the disciplined hunters who had conquered 73 species. The Krell's entire culture revolves around being the apex predator, Dr. Chin explained to the assembled commanders and political leaders. Being hunted themselves is psychologically devastating to them in ways we're only beginning to understand. Their social structure, their religion, their entire worldview is based on the fundamental belief that they are the hunters and everyone else is prey. We've shattered that belief and they don't know how to process it. So we keep pushing, Blake said. We keep hitting their supply lines, raiding their outposts, striking at their territories. We make them chase us. Eventually, their command structure will fracture under the stress. President Walsh, who'd been listening quietly, finally spoke up. Or they'll decide to stop playing by their own rules and just destroy Earth from orbit. If we push them too far, they might abandon their hunting traditions entirely and settle for simple genocide. The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. It was the risk they'd been taking from the beginning. Push the Krell too hard, and they might decide that if they couldn't hunt humanity properly, they'd just exterminate humanity completely. That's why we need leverage, Kate said, pulling up a tactical display. We currently hold over 300 Krell prisoners, including Krellmore himself. In their culture, leaving warriors behind is considered worse than death. It's the ultimate dishonor. We offer them a trade. Safe passage for their prisoners, an immediate end to the hunt, and a formal treaty recognizing human territory as off-limits. They'll never accept, Blake said skeptically. They've hunted 73 species to extinction or near extinction. Why would they negotiate with number 74? Kate's smile was sharp and cold. Because for the first time in their entire history as a spacefaring species, they're losing. Not just losing battles but losing the war. And they know it. The human hunter-killer fleet grew to 30 ships by the end of the 8th month of the war. They were all converted civilian vessels, none larger than a small frigate, all crewed by volunteers who knew the odds of survival weren't good. But they were devastatingly effective at their mission. Commander James Mitchell, brother of the Ryan Mitchell who died in the first Ghost Protocol mission, led the most successful hunting group. His wolf pack of 5 ships specialized in tracking and destroying Krell supply convoys. They'd perfected the art of the ambush, following convoys for days or even weeks, learning their patterns, identifying their weaknesses, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. When they finally attacked, it was with coordinated precision. They'd hit from multiple angles simultaneously, disable escort ships with focused fire on known weak points in Krell shields, destroy the supply vessels before the Krell could react, and then disappear into random jump coordinates before reinforcements could arrive. The Krell started calling them Jthrock in their language. The translation came out as shadow killers, or ghost predators. In human terms, the Krell were calling them terrorists. James Mitchell wore the title proudly. They want to call us terrorists for defending our home? He said during a communication with Kate. Fine. We're the terrorists who ended 73 genocides. We're the monsters who stopped the monsters. I'll take that label gladly. But the campaign was extracting a terrible cost from both sides. Humanity had lost over 100,000 military personnel and more than twice that number of civilians. Entire colonies had been reduced to debris fields. Earth itself bore scars from Krell bombardment that would take decades to repair. The war had cost humanity more lives and resources than any conflict in its history. The Krell, however, were losing something more fundamental than lives and ships. They were losing their identity as the galaxy's apex predators. Krell warriors who had eagerly volunteered for the Grand Hunt were now requesting transfers to safer duties. Hunter ships that had competed for the honor of leading attacks were now hanging back, cautious and fearful. The psychological damage humanity had inflicted was far worse than the physical damage. And then everything changed. The transmission came through on a Krell command frequency that Earth's intelligence division had been monitoring. Kate was reviewing casualty reports when the alert came through. By the time she reached the command center, General Blake and President Walsh were already there, listening to the translation with expressions of shock. Human leadership of the third planet of Sol. The Krell voice rumbled through the speakers, translated by computer into flat, emotionless English. The Krell Dominion acknowledges your persistence in this conflict. We offer terms for the conclusion of the hunt. Cease your raids beyond your home system. Return our captured warriors to us. In exchange, we will withdraw all forces from your territory. The hunt will be concluded. Your species will be spared from further action. The word spared carried a weight of wounded pride, as if it physically hurt the speaker to say it. Kate looked at Blake in disbelief. They're negotiating. They're retreating, Blake corrected. There's a significant difference. No, Dr. Chin said, studying the linguistic analysis scrolling across her screen. The Colonel is right. Look at the phrasing, the word choices. They're not offering surrender. They're offering to conclude the hunt on terms. In Krell culture, that's not defeat. It's recognition. They're acknowledging that humans are worthy adversaries, not prey. They're acknowledging we're worthy of not being exterminated, Walsh said bitterly. How generous of them. Actually, Madam President, Chin replied carefully, it's unprecedented. I've analyzed every Krell communication in our captured databases. They've never negotiated with prey species before. Not once in 3,000 years. They either hunt to extinction or to complete submission. This offering of terms, this acknowledgement of worthiness, it's something they've never done before. Over the next week, intelligence reports confirmed that the Krell were serious. Their forces began pulling back from the inner solar system in organized withdrawals. Not fleeing, the Krell would never flee, but conducting orderly tactical retreats. They consolidated around Jupiter's orbit, establishing what looked like defensive positions rather than staging grounds for attacks. And the hunting raids stopped completely. No more attacks on colonies. No more hunting parties descending on human settlements. Just watchful waiting. They actually mean it, Blake said during an emergency session of Earth's military leadership. The question now is whether we accept their terms or press our advantage. We've lost 100,000 people, Walsh said, exhaustion evident in every word. Our economy is barely functioning. Half our orbital infrastructure is destroyed or damaged. We desperately need time to rebuild. And they need time to regroup and plan their next move, Kate countered. We have them on the defensive for the first time in their recorded history. If we let them withdraw now, regroup, and come back in 10 years with better tactics. Then what would you have us do? Walsh demanded. Chase them across the galaxy? We have 30 converted freighters with stolen FTL technology. They have thousands of purpose-built warships. The only reason we've survived this long is because we made our home territory hell for them to operate in. Out there in deep space, fighting on their terms in their territory, they'll destroy us. Kate wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words. Walsh was right. Humanity had won by turning the solar system into a trap, by using home field advantage and guerrilla tactics that played to human strengths. A conventional war across interstellar space would be suicide. We accept their terms, Blake finally said. We take the victory. We get our people back, we rebuild, and we prepare in case there's a next time. There won't be a next time, Shin said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Don't you understand what we've done? We broke them. Not just militarily. Psychologically. The Krell have spent 3,000 years believing they're the ultimate predators in the galaxy. We shattered that belief completely. Every Krell warrior alive now knows that prey can fight back. That prey can win. That being the hunter doesn't guarantee victory. They'll never look at other species the same way again. Kate nodded slowly, understanding dawning. We didn't just beat them. We changed them. We changed what they believe about themselves and the universe. Exactly, Chin agreed. And that's a more permanent victory than destroying their fleet ever could be. The negotiations took place in neutral space, halfway between Jupiter and Saturn, aboard a hastily constructed diplomatic station that humanity had thrown together in just 3 weeks. It wasn't pretty, but it was functional, and more importantly, it was neutral ground where neither side held an advantage. Kate Stevens led the human delegation. She'd volunteered for the job, knowing full well that the Krell might see the negotiations as an opportunity for one final treacherous strike. But she'd spent the last 9 months betting her life on her understanding of Krell psychology, and she was willing to bet it one more time. The Krell delegation arrived with all the ceremony and formality their culture demanded. Krellmore himself was there, released from human custody as a gesture of good faith. Kate barely recognized him. The proud war leader who'd commanded the Tycho base looked diminished somehow. His armor was duller, his posture less arrogant, his 6 eyes lacking the cold confidence she remembered. 9 months of captivity and defeat had changed him in fundamental ways. The negotiations lasted 3 grueling days. The Krell agreed to withdraw all forces from human space immediately. They agreed to return all human prisoners, 734 survivors from various colony raids who'd somehow managed to stay alive in Krell captivity. They even agreed to provide compensation in the form of technology and resources to help humanity rebuild. But they absolutely refused to provide any information about the other 73 species they'd hunted. Those hunts are concluded, the Krell High Counselor's representative insisted, his translator rendering his words with mechanical precision. Their outcomes are not relevant to this negotiation. The fates of previous prey are not human concern. Then we don't have a deal, Kate said calmly, leaning back in her chair. We'll resume operations immediately. My ships are ready to jump the moment I give the order. The Krell delegation reacted like she'd slapped them. Several of them half rose from their seats, their claws scraping against the metal table. For a moment, Kate thought they might attack her right there in the negotiation chamber, diplomatic protocols be damned. Then Krellmore spoke for the first time since the negotiations began. Give them the data. Every Krell in the room turned to stare at him in shock. In their culture, a warrior who had surrendered and been captured had no voice in council decisions. He was supposed to remain silent, accepting his dishonor without complaint. You violated protocol by speaking, the representative began, his voice sharp with anger. I violated nothing, Krellmore interrupted, his voice a low growl. I survived. I observed. I learned what you refused to see. He turned his 6 eyes directly on Kate, and she saw something in them she'd never expected to see in a Krell, respect. The humans do not hunt for sport or glory, Krellmore continued. They hunt to end hunting. They will not stop until every species in the galaxy knows what they have learned, that prey can become predator. That being hunted does not mean accepting death. He stood to his full impressive height, towering over everyone in the room. They have already shared their knowledge with the Villani survivors. The Villani are rebuilding their civilization with human weapons and human tactics. How long before they find another species that the Krell hunted? How long before they share what they know? How long before the galaxy is full of species that refuse to be prey? The silence in the negotiation chamber was absolute. No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. The age of the hunt is over, Krellmore said flatly. We can accept this truth now, on terms we help shape, or we can learn it the hard way over the next century, hunted by every species we ever preyed upon. I have been prey. I have felt what it means to be hunted by an enemy that never stops, never forgives, never forgets. I do not wish to feel it again. And I do not wish it upon our children or our children's children. The High Counselor's representative stared at Krellmore for a long moment. Then he looked at Kate. Then at his fellow Krell delegates. Kate could see the internal struggle playing out across his face. Finally he nodded slowly. We will provide the data you request. 3 weeks later, the last Krell ship departed from human space. Kate stood on the observation deck of Unity Station, Earth's primary orbital defense platform, watching the massive hunter ships disappear one by one into faster-than-light travel. Next to her, General Blake held a cup of coffee, his first real rest in almost 10 months. We did it, he said quietly. We actually survived. We won, Kate corrected gently. That's not quite the same as just surviving. Close enough for me. Blake pulled up a data tablet showing the information dump the Krell had provided. Look at this. Coordinates for 73 prey species across the galaxy. Some of them still have survivors hiding in deep space. Some might even have viable populations if they were given a chance to rebuild without fear. That's the plan, Kate said. We make contact with as many as we can find. We share everything we learned about fighting the Krell. We help them build defenses. We create an alliance of all the species the Krell hunted. An alliance against the Krell? An alliance that makes hunting sentient beings impossible, Kate replied. The Krell won't hunt again, not if every potential prey species knows how to fight back effectively. And any other species out there that thinks hunting sentience is acceptable will think twice when they see what happened to the Krell. Blake was quiet for a moment, staring at his coffee. We changed during the war, fighting them. We did things that would have gotten us court-martialed before the Krell arrived. We used tactics that violate every convention of warfare humanity ever agreed to. We became something dark. I know, Kate said softly. We became what we needed to become. We did terrible things to survive. The question is, Blake said, looking at her seriously, can we stop now? Can we go back to being the civilization we were before? Or have we changed permanently into something else? Kate looked out at Earth, still visible from this distance despite the scars the war had left on its surface. Cities rebuilding. Forests being replanted. Orbital structures being repaired. I think we're something new. Not the idealistic civilization we were before first contact. Not the brutal survivors we became during the war. Something in between. Something that understands both peace and violence, and knows when each is necessary. 18 months after the Krell withdrew, something unprecedented happened. 47 different species gathered for what was being called the Galactic Council. The last time such a gathering had occurred was 3,000 years ago, when the Krell had announced their dominance and dared anyone to challenge them. No one had, and the age of hunting had begun. Now the council met again, but humanity had called the gathering. Ambassador Michael Torres stood at the podium in Accord Station, a massive orbital facility humanity had built specifically for this meeting. Around him, representatives from 47 species waited. Some were old friends like the Villani. Others were species humanity had never encountered before, survivors of previous Krell hunts who'd lived in hiding for decades or even centuries. And in a heavily guarded section off to one side sat the Krell delegation, including Krellmore. 3 years ago, humanity made first contact with alien life, Torres began, his words being translated simultaneously into dozens of languages by sophisticated AI systems. The Villani warned us about the Krell. They told us we were about to become the 74th species to be hunted. And they were right. He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. But today I stand before you not as a victim, but as proof that the hunters can be stopped. We survived. We fought back. We won. A rustle went through the assembled species. Some had seen the recordings humanity had shared. Others were hearing the full story for the first time. But we're not here to celebrate humanity's victory, Torres continued. We're here to make sure what happened to the 73 species before us never happens again. We're here to build something new. He activated a holographic display showing a map of known space. Human territory was tiny. Krell space was vast. But scattered across the map were markers for dozens of other species, most of them small and vulnerable. We're proposing the Galactic Accord, Torres said. A mutual defense treaty. One simple rule. Any species that attacks another sentient species unprovoked will face the combined military response of all Accord members. We protect each other. We defend each other. We make hunting sentient beings impossible. Impossible, came Krellmore's voice from the Krell section. He stood, his massive form drawing every eye in the chamber. You propose to enforce your morality on the entire galaxy? No, Torres replied calmly. We propose one rule: don't hunt sentient beings for sport. That's all. Trade with them, compete with them, even go to war if you must. But don't exterminate them because you enjoy it. Don't treat thinking, feeling beings as prey to be collected as trophies. A delegate from the Threx species, large insectoid beings who'd been the Krell's 61st hunt, spoke up. And if the Krell refuse? If they resume hunting? Torres turned to look directly at Krellmore. Then we hunt them. All of us. Together. Every species in this room becomes their predator. We teach them what it truly means to be prey. The chamber erupted in reactions. Some species cheered. Others looked terrified at the prospect of more conflict. The Krell delegation sat in stony silence. Finally, Krellmore walked to the center of the chamber. The humans speak boldly, he said. They speak of hunting the Krell as if it would be simple. He paused, his 6 eyes scanning the assembled species. Let me tell you what humans did to us. They refused to fight with honor. They used our tactics against us. They made our warriors afraid. They invaded our home system and showed us what it feels like to have death hanging over our families. His voice grew softer. I have been prey. I surrendered to humans, the first Krell war leader to surrender in 3,000 years of our history. I have felt their persistence, their refusal to give up, their willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. Do I believe humans would hunt the Krell if we broke this accord? Yes. Do I believe other species would join them? He looked around the chamber. Some would not. But it does not matter. He turned back to Torres. The age of hunting is over. Not because of your weapons or your accord, but because prey everywhere now knows they can fight back. The Krell will sign your agreement. Not because we fear you, but because we have learned that the universe is more interesting when we are not the only apex predators. The signing ceremony took 3 days, with each species following its own cultural rituals. Some signed in blood. Others used bioluminescent inks. One species transmitted its agreement via complex electromagnetic patterns. The Krell marked the document with deep claw gouges, a traditional oath in their culture. Humanity signed last, Ambassador Torres placing a simple biometric scan on the digital document. The accord is ratified, Torres announced. From this moment forward, the galaxy has one law: sentient life is precious. Any species that violates this principle will answer to all of us. Kate Stevens watched from the gallery, out of uniform for the first time in years. Next to her, Dr. Chen was quietly crying. We did it, Chen whispered. We saved them. All of them. We gave them a chance, Kate said. That's all. What they do with it is up to them. 5 years after first contact, Kate stood on a hill overlooking what remained of New Pittsburgh. The colony had never been rebuilt. Instead, it served as a memorial to the 50 million humans who died in the war. A massive wall bore all their names, carved deep into metal that would last for centuries. Kate's granddaughter, 8-year-old Amy, stood beside her, looking up at the endless names with wide eyes. Grandma, Amy asked, what was the war like? Kate knelt down to her granddaughter's level. Scary. Painful. Necessary. Did you hurt people? I killed Krell warriors who were trying to kill humans, Kate said honestly. She'd promised herself she'd never lie to her grandchildren about the war. Sometimes in war you have to do terrible things to protect the people you love. Are the Krell still bad? Kate looked across the memorial grounds where she could see a group of visitors. One of them was Krell, a civilian researcher studying human history. The Krell are different now, Kate said carefully. They're learning to be something other than hunters. Just like we had to learn to be something other than just survivors. What did you learn? Kate smiled, pulling Amy close. That being the strongest doesn't make you the best. That winning doesn't have to mean making others lose. That the galaxy is big enough for everyone if we're willing to share it. Amy thought about this seriously. That's what all those people died for? That's what their sacrifice made possible, Kate corrected gently. And that's why we remember them. Not just because they died, but because of what their deaths gave us. Understanding. A chance to build something better. As they walked back to their transport, Kate glanced back at the memorial. The Krell researcher was standing in front of the wall of names, reading them slowly and carefully. 20 years ago, a Krell would never have visited a monument to their prey. Would never have acknowledged their victims as individuals worthy of remembrance. Times had changed. The galaxy had changed. And humanity had changed it. They had been hunted. They had hunted back. And then they had done something no prey species in recorded history had ever accomplished. They had won not just the war but the peace that followed. In orbit above, the Accord Defense Fleet maintained watch, over 200 ships from dozens of species, working together to ensure that no one would ever face what humanity and 73 other species had endured. Human vessels flew alongside Villani ships. Thrax dreadnoughts patrolled with Krell cruisers. Former hunters and former prey, working together to protect something more important than pride or tradition. The age of hunting had ended. The age of cooperation had begun. And Earth, small, scarred, surviving Earth, had made it all possible by refusing to accept being prey. By showing the galaxy that the most dangerous predator wasn't the strongest or fastest or most advanced. It was the one that refused to give up. The one that turned fear into fury. The one that remembered every loss and channeled it into determination. The one that looked at impossible odds and decided to fight anyway. Humanity hadn't just survived first contact with the galaxy's apex predators. They'd ended the concept of apex predators entirely. And in doing so, they'd given every species in the galaxy something more valuable than dominance. The chance to live without fear, to grow without being hunted, to thrive without looking over their shoulders for predators in the dark. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons or tactics or military strength, but a simple idea that changed everything. Prey doesn't have to stay prey forever. Sometimes, if you fight hard enough, if you refuse to give up, if you're willing to do whatever it takes to survive, sometimes the hunted becomes the hunter. And sometimes, just sometimes, the hunter learns to become something better than either.